back. We're here. We're going to tell you a story.
A long story.
It's a long story. We've wanted to tell you this story for a while. It's the story of the STi. You know that we've had this car, we've talked about it, kind of in and out, right? Working on it, it's braking, then it works. It's working right now. We're driving it.
Successfully.
We may run out of gas because Adam's trying to run it out of gas so that he can do some maintenance, whatever. Let's not get sidetracked. So it's a long story, and we were trying to figure out the best way to tell this story of the STi, basically getting it, what's happened with it, the terror it has put on our lives. So we figured the best way to do it is we're currently driving around with the 4th engine that's been in this thing.
Yes.
So let's call that chapter 4. Let's go back to the 1st engine. Call that chapter 1. And that's how we'll walk through this tale.
That's fair.
So you kick it off. This is mostly your problem.
So this is the 2004 STi. Purchased this car in May of 2014.
That's a long time ago, right? That was almost 7 years ago.
So at the time, I was driving a 2012 WRX hatch. It was dark gray, base model WRX. It was a great car. I never had any issues with it the 2.5 years I drove it. But I, of course, had lusted after STIs forever, and just it was at the point where I really wanted to upgrade to an STI. I really wanted a 0405 because those were my favorite of all of the generations
I have a
thus
question.
far. What's your question?
Is it still your favorite?
It is, yes. The STI hatches definitely have a special place in my heart, and at the time, if I could have just traded up to an STI hatch, right, that would have been great, but unfortunately, they have the same problems this car does, so
anyway,
it could have potentially been in the same spot. Anyway, they were still too new at the time, so the STI that I could afford, and I do really like this body style. Like I've said before, I had the bug eye, which is almost exactly the same as this, minus the exterior panels. And this, I like a little more than the 0607. That like pig nose thing just kind of throws me off.
I am not a fan of the 0607. No hate to you if that's your jam. It's just not mine. The Hawkeye is not my vibe.
They can look nice. That was actually the first STI I ever saw in person, was in a white 06 STI when they were brand new, and it was like stunning. But if I could have the choice of the 3 front ends, I do like the 0405 the best. I think it's the most sleek, and I've always wanted to have an Aspen white Subaru because I think this is a very sharp looking white color with the gold wheels. It's a nice combo. So that was my specific goal, was to find a white 0405, and even then they were already pretty rare just because all STIs get modded and beat up and totaled and blown up. So it's hard to find one that is in good condition. I wanted one that was either stock or very close to being stock. So the one I found, this one, was in Pennsylvania. I had been looking on and off for years. One of my hobbies is just browsing for used cars, even though
really weird.
Most of them I don't buy, obviously. This one popped up. I knew it had an intake and some suspension bits and an exhaust, but other than that, it looked pretty stock, and at the time it was very, very clean. So I drove out, I looked at it. It was a little more modded, I think, than I thought. I saw in pictures. I didn't realize it had a downpipe. I didn't realize it had coilovers. They were like tall. They were rally style coilovers, so they looked like the car was at the stock height. So drove it, obviously fell in love with it. Drove back a week later and traded my WRX for it, and then drove this thing home.
So you may think to yourself, you traded a 2012 brand new WRX for a questionable 2004 STi. And you might say, Laura, why did you not talk him out of this? Well, this is the problem. I also thought it was a good idea. If I had said absolutely not, do not do that, like we were dating at the time, we lived together, I feel like you may have listened to me.
Probably, yeah.
You probably would have listened to me. So this is partially my fault. Like, I was like, oh, it's cute, you know? And it is. It's real cute. But was it our best decision? Maybe not. Yeah, I probably could have stepped in. But anyway, so he drives it home.
So I drove it 4 hours home. No problems. I stopped on the side of the road to take some pictures because I was all happy and proud of this beautiful white STi that I was now driving.
Basically your dream Subaru is what you had just acquired.
Exactly. So make it home, no problem.
I'm excited.
Laura's excited to see it.
So I'm like, give me the keys, let me drive this. We go for a drive, it's like in the evening, right, because he just got home. I am not going hard on this thing at all, and the check engine light comes on. So naturally, I die inside. And I felt horrible, and this was kind of the first moment where we're like, a little worried about this car.
Right. I knew because it had the aftermarket downpipe that it may potentially have some sort of tuning issue. Some downpipes, even if they have a catalytic converter in them, can throw an O2 code just because of the extra exhaust gases flowing past the O2. I knew right away that I wanted to get an access port and make sure it was actually on the stage 2 Cobb tune that was recommended for the parts that were on the car. I had no idea what tune was on this, if it even had a tune. It could have been tuned by access port and then they just deleted the access port and sold it before they sold the car. It could have had some sort of open source tune on the ECU that some tuner just programmed. There could have been any number of possibilities. So
it could have been running the stock tune.
It could have been running the stock tune on parts that should really have an aftermarket tune on them. Within a couple days of buying the car, I purchased a second-hand access port and got the car set up on the stage 2 tune that took care of the check engine light. So at that point, I was just interested in the basic maintenance and eventually getting to the point where I was going to replace all the aftermarket parts with stock parts and just drive a stock STi, because that was always my goal with this.
That was the dream. That was the vision. So about a month after he drove this home, we were like, you know what? Let's road trip this thing. So we were planning on going to Wicked Big Meat, and this was in 2014. So if you were at 2014 Wicked Big Meat, so were we. It's a big Subaru meet it was in Connecticut.
Right.
It was far enough away where we were like, okay, it's gonna be a long drive. We just got this car. Let's make a whole trip out of it. So our plan was to drive to Providence, Rhode Island, which I don't really know why. I think we were just let's go stay in an Airbnb there, which it was fun. It was great. Then the plan was to go from Providence to Wicked Big Meat, meet up with some friends, have a grand old time.
On our way there, the car started overheating, like real bad. I don't remember if it had started like overheating more mildly during the trip. I don't
My memory is that it started overheating as we're coming into Providence.
Okay.
I feel like this was a while ago. I remember it being like we're in Providence and it's overheating, because I remember sitting in the car in front of the Airbnb and having the heat blasting.
Oh yeah, and I remember we could see like coolant steaming out of the engine bay.
Yeah.
So alright, so it must have started overheating like right before we got there. We decided to try to drive it into the city to get something to eat and go see a show, and we never made it there. It started overheating really badly. We just turned around, drove back to the Airbnb and let it sit for the night. So I think it
probably picked up a bunch of coolant.
Yeah. And it was like an hour and a half drive from our Airbnb in Providence to Wicked Big Meat. So we topped off the coolant and were able to make it there, I think, without major incident.
Yeah,
we were definitely
think you just kept checking it.
Yeah, we were keeping the air conditioning off, and we were like blasting the heat on occasion to help mitigate the overheating. We made it to Wicked Big Meat, met up with our friends, and we were kind of like chatting about the overheating. My buddy was looking at the radiator, and he's like, oh, your radiator's cracked, like pretty badly. So then we figured out that was leaking coolant. That's why the car was overheating. So Wicked Big Meat has tons of vendors there with all sorts of parts, but usually it's small stuff, battery tie downs, keychains, stuff that they can fit in a trailer.
If they're selling parts, though, it's performance parts.
Right, yeah.
But we went around to every single one of them and said, hey, do you have any radiators? And they're all like, no.
I think one agreed to like sell me one that they would ship me
Well, one of them was like semi-local, and he's like, I could call the shop or something.
Yeah. And I think at even one point we were talking to somebody who had a race car, and I was gonna like trade their race car radiator because they were planning on replacing it anyway, but it wasn't really worth it in the end. So
we tried. Long story short, we could not acquire a new radiator by like that afternoon.
Yeah.
When we were at Wicked Big Meat.
So we decided to JB Weld the radiator. So
yeah,
anybody
big
who's
thanks to JB Weld for sponsoring this video. Actually a lie. I mean, we'd be okay with it.
For anybody who's unfamiliar, JB Weld is just a 2-part epoxy. It's like a really strong glue that you can glue plastics together.
It's car glue.
Car glue, basically. And it's notorious for people that like hack their way through auto repairs using it to like permanently repair stuff. I try not to do that, but as far as just getting us home from Connecticut back to Western New York, I figured if I was able to JB Weld over the cracks in the radiator, top off the coolant, maybe the car would make it home and we wouldn't be stuck on the side of the road overheating. So
naturally, I trust him. Also, this is where, you know, if anyone ever tells you, date a car guy, maybe think twice. So anyway, we find ourselves in an AutoZone parking lot, naturally.
Yeah.
He pops in, buys some JB Weld, and in that parking lot, he begins gluing the radiator back together.
We get in there, I buy the JB Weld, and I buy the coolant, and I'm just chatting with the guys. I'm like, hey, do you mind if I kind of glue this back together in your parking lot, and then we just leave it there for a couple hours so that the glue can maybe have a chance to bond? And they were fine with it. Luckily, there was a diner across the street, and I was like, let's just go get some dinner there, and then hopefully there will be enough time for the JB Weld to firm up, and then we can just top off the coolant and head home.
I also vividly remember me sitting in the grass, like on the side of the parking lot in the shade while he's like gluing the car back together, just thinking, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah. So this whole time it was June and we weren't able to use the air conditioning, and we were frequently turning the heat on to try to lower the temperature. So it was very hot. And other people at Wicked Big Meat were like starting their cars and sitting in them just to let the air conditioning cool them down.
I've never been more envious in my whole life.
So we get the radiator JB welded, and we have our meal at this nice diner in wherever, Connecticut, and then we drive home, and we made it home successfully.
We did. I feel like you're looking for a pat on the back that you successfully glued the radiator back together. I still resent being put in that position in general. So anyway, to set the scene a little more, this happened a month after getting this car. So we get it back home. Of course, Adam replaces the radiator, right? Easy peasy. And we go about our lives. So one of the discoveries that was unpleasant after the radiator saga was the wiring.
So one of the windows stopped working, and then 2 more windows stopped working. So only one window would roll up and down, which wasn't great. So I started taking the door panels apart to try to figure out why the window switches aren't working at all, and I just discover an absolute rat's nest of wiring. It was disgusting. The speaker wiring was terrible, the which wiring was terrible, and there was just things that didn't make any sense of why someone would wire the car this way. I was just absolutely appalled. And by the way, not anything that I would have discovered just checking this car out in a parking lot. Like, it's not like I could be at a dealership like taking door panels off to make sure that all the wiring is good in the car.
I mean, if they let you, maybe we'd recommend it if,
Yeah.
if you're in a similar position.
If you're buying an 80,000 mile 10-year-old STI, I would recommend it.
And I mean, I don't know anything about like what wiring should look like, but I could look at what he found in the door and be like, that's bad.
Yeah, and the speakers worked and the windows worked when I test drove and purchased the car, so I didn't really have anything to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, you had rewired the speakers, right, in the apartment parking lot.
Yep, yeah, that's when I first discovered everything, and like the speakers were barely even connected. Like the wiring was just kind of wrapped around itself. It wasn't actually like soldered or crimped in any sort of fashion that you normally would when you install aftermarket speakers. So I took care of that. The speakers themselves were good, so I just needed to rewire them, and they're still working now. That's, yeah, when I really discovered how bad it was in the aftermarket window regulator, which you don't need in this car at all. So why someone would have wired one of those in?
Well, what do you think they were trying to do?
The only thing I can think of is there's certain car brands like Volkswagen where the key fob from the factory, if you like press one of the buttons twice, the windows will vent, and if you press it again, they'll go all the way down, or you can put them up, but you can control the windows with the keyless remote. The only thing I can think of is there was some sort of system like that they were trying to install, like an aftermarket system that needed this special regulator, but even that doesn't really make sense, so I'm at a complete loss.
Yeah, you had someone fix that.
Yeah, it was beyond my scope of wanting to deal with, so I found a friend of a friend who would install like audio systems and security systems in cars, so he was used to doing all the very, very fine wiring that is necessary in order to fix something like that. So he was able to fix it in an afternoon.
Did he live around here?
I think he did live around here, actually.
Thanks, friend. Shout out to you.
Among all of this stuff, I'm putting it back to stock, and eventually it got to the point where the car was completely stock. Stock exhaust, stock airbox, stock suspension.
And it seemed like fairly okay. I mean, there were some questionable things, like you kept coming across various wiring issues. That was definitely a problem. There was the outline of a shocker sticker on the back window, which I didn't appreciate. It was like someone had put on the tint and then put on a sticker and then pulled the sticker off, but like you could still see the outline. So I was like, that's classy, love that for us. So for the most part, it seemed okay. It was fairly smooth sailing. But then, so I think it was June of 2016. It was Father's Day weekend. I remember I was driving to my parents for Father's Day, and I took a corner, a hard corner that I'd normally take fast because it's a fun corner. I took that, and I think I was in second or third gear, and when I like floored it out of the corner, I heard a pop, the check engine light came on, and then the car was running really rough after that point. So I had like a gut feeling that it was going to be something really bad, and turns out it was, because I limped the car back to my parents' house, I limped it back to our apartment. I must have let it sit there, and then I did a compression test eventually, and one of the cylinders had like 60 psi of compression, so it's normally supposed to have about 120. So no compression is never a good thing. It's never an easy fix. At the very bare minimum, it would be head gaskets, but it's usually in these engines some sort of piston failure. We were, at the time, looking to buy a house. We had just gotten engaged, and we knew we wouldn't be able to, well, I knew I wouldn't have a chance to repair the car. I didn't want to spend the money on repairing the car right away. We were in a tricky position because before we bought our house, he would be like working on cars at his parents or like in an apartment parking lot, which they don't love.
Yeah.
So he obviously was not going to pull the engine in a parking lot. So we kind of put it on the back burner. He needed something else to drive. That's when I knew it was bad when he was like, I found this truck for $1,200, let's go get it. And I was like, ooh, STI is really toast, isn't it? So So we picked up the Silverado then.
Yep, and that helped us move into our house, so that was a win.
Yeah.
Win in a bad situation.
Right.
That's the story of the first engine.
That's the first engine. It blew up. Poor thing. I feel like we had bad vibes about the car from the beginning. Like, we were excited about it, but we were always a little suspicious of it.
Yeah, that's very true.
We still love it. Obviously, we kept it all these years. We could have sold it after that, but the story does not end there. So that is chapter 1. Chapter 2 will begin in our new house. Adam has a garage that he's the owner of, you know, and he will pull the engine and go from there. So that's chapter 1.
Yep,
engine
stick around
1.
for chapter 2.
Yeah, stick around for chapter 2. It's a long story, and if you've seen other recent videos about the STi, we'll kind of connect the dots so that you'll have the full tale. Are we kind of crazy for putting up with so much from this car? Probably. Would you have just gotten rid of it? We understand if the answer is yes. But anyway, thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Bye, guys.
Bye.